So, can you talk about painting clear pictures of safe versus unsafe environments, and then how a safe environment still has discipline structures within it?
Yeah, so like let's say like a safe. I think a most common one if you showed up to an AU basketball tournament is just your communication, right? And that could be so broad. I would say communication behavior because I've had coaches growing up that were like, "Yeah, man, Vic, man, just go do your thing, right? Like I got your back, like." And then you throw one turnover, and then you hear that like sub, right? And it's like, but you said I could like go out there and go hoop, right? And just like experiment because I was that kid after a while that would not trust adults anymore, right? I hear you saying like, I want you to go out there and do your thing, and then you do two, three, four things right, make one mistake, and it's like you're subbed out, right? So now as the kid, I'm just like, now I don't even want to do anything. I don't even want to make a mistake. I don't even want to try it and take some risks, right? Like which it's all over the basketball court, right? So I think from a communication standpoint and just like thinking about a kid's development, knowing that they're gonna go out there and make mistakes, is like being able to like make sure they feel secure in going out there and taking risks. And then when things happen, your behavior not being like, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, coaches just reacting, being able to like kind of like, restrain from showing outwardly behaviors, right, of frustration, right? It's so tough as coaches because there's so many things going on, but like that's a responsibility that you have, right? And I think one thing, a quote that or an interview I heard from Jason Kidd, or it might have been from like one of the players, somebody asked like why they feel so confident and why they feel so like calm on the court. And I want to say it was one of the players that they were talking to. I want to say it was Luka, um, but one of the players was talking about, well, our coach is very calm on the court when things are happening. He's just like, we just gotta like keep working, keep optimizing, just keep adjusting how we need to. And if you watch Jason Kidd as a coach, he's not like screaming and reacting like crazy, right? And when somebody said that on the Mavericks, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense because then I started watching the players and how they were playing, how they were reacting play by play, and they were very calm, right? And so I think that kind of goes back to like setting the tone as a coach. So I think it's that communication and you validating your communication as a coach help create safety because if you don't, if you're saying like, hey, I'm right behind you. I want you to just go do your thing. I want you to take risks. I want to see you grow, and your behaviors are not showing up in that way. Then I think that like makes a kid not trust the situation, and then eventually makes a kid not feel feel like they can bring their whole self into the basketball environment, right? Which is so key.
Right.
Um, Now thinking about discipline, I also one thing that I've kind of seen, and I've been a coach that's done this before, is we get on kids about things that one we might not have even addressed or like shown that this is something that could come up in a practice or have worked on things, right? We'll get on kids of like, what were you thinking, right? In a situation where we have coaches have not prepped our team in those situations, right? So when we're thinking about discipline, I feel like from a expectation standpoint, they're just kind of just like best practices the first that need to be communicated to your team and your players like beforehand, right? Like at the end of the day, we want our team to operate at a high level. Um, Here are some things that are going to help us grow as individuals and as a team, right? Kind of having those expectations, making sure that they're realistic based on like the team that you have. And then now we can have a culture that we set is like, all right, discipline in how we do things is understand that we need to operate at a high level, um, and being very virtuous about our character, right? Then if that's the expectation, then we'll work on those things. Those things don't happen just in one tournament. That happens over time, right? So as a coach, also understanding that like maybe your team is not quote unquote disciplined at this point, but there's still kids learning even what discipline means, right? What does that even mean? And how, as a kid, am I going to see that add value to my life? Like, where do I see that showing up, adding to like positive experiences? right? So I think from a communication standpoint, like you have to set that like beforehand. Then as a coach in our practices and everything that we do, a kid coming to the gym or, how we start practices, like if we're going to talk about hustling, right? Or things like that. A lot of kids don't know what that means sometimes, right? They don't know that we got to, dive it on the floor for a ball, right? Do we have drills where we're showing kids how to dive for a ball, or like the safety around, like if you're diving for a ball on the floor, like here's how to make sure that you don't get hurt, right? There's so many things that we have to build out as coaches that we don't. And we end up saying like, yo, these kids are not disciplined, right? Also not understand, like, again, you had a one-on-one talk with your kid about, discipline. If a kid's not showing these values, right? Or what you want them to do or what you want to see, right? We don't have one-on-one communication with our kids. We just, if the kid is not being disciplined, we kind of get on them, but we're not thinking about, like, I wonder, like, what's the barrier? What am I not doing that's not allowing my player to understand like what we're trying to do, right? So there's a lot more strategies, a lot more deep diving that I feel like we need to do as coaches. But I'm very empathetic too of just like coaches, like there's a lot that we got to do, and like we're doing it, we're bringing, a lot of our energy and effort, but it's just like if we can add a little more to our bag, some strategies and tools, some more routines to our bag, it's just going to make everything easier. And coaches are not going to have a lot of those problems around discipline or communication if we're able to build that into the routine of our young players.
100%. And so the running through line I kind of hear from that. So kind of talking about what you're talking about with Jason Kidd is he models, right? He
Mhm.
uses his body language to model being calm and cool and collected, right? Instead of overreacting to the refs, overreacting to mistakes from players, right? So that comes from the coach in terms of their body language communication. And then as far as, discipline, right? Making sure that we communicate our standards of our team. It's got to be communicated over and over and over again. And then, of course, if there are certain players that are not meeting, whether it's the hustle standards, right? You have to ask yourself, are we communicating what that looks like enough? And then
Mhm.
two, if we are we having a one-on-one conversation about maybe the reasons player X is not, kind of demonstrating that hustle? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There's so many other examples, but like
Right.
that's like kind of one of my gut reactions. Yeah, based off that.
Cool. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me. And so for me, kind of as a coach and building out this program, I feel like as I'm hearing, I'm thinking like it's my responsibility now to communicate with the coaches what our standards are, and then how they communicate and they show up. And so that's kind of just like that leveling up of leadership in terms of it's now my responsibility to communicate that to the coaches, because every coach comes in with their different experiences, just like our different athletes.
Yeah, which is beautiful, right? You want your coaches to come in and feel like they can be their whole selves as well, right? And like we can be totally different coaches, but understanding like, yo, this is like our non-negotiables, right? As coaches, and still do great work,
Right.
right? And it's not, again, we're not about the one-way coaching kind of landscape, right? As I talked about before. And so like, yeah, and it's not easy. You do have to spend time doing that. Like you have to figure out what do I want my program to be about? What I want my coaches to be about? Because at the end of the day, we want our kids to stay in the game. We want them to be motivated and to want to keep developing. We want them to want to come back. And even if they don't make it to college, even if they don't make it on varsity or to college or the pros, like when they become adults, can they look back and say, like, you know what? Like, I love this program. I love these coaches because, like, I learned X, Y, and Z and more. And I feel like I can directly look back to those experiences and translate them to like a lot of ways I think and a lot of ways that I go after my goals. Um, I think that's like the best thing that we can, do for our young people through sport because there's so much magic in it. But again, we just got to be very intentional because if we don't, then you're going to find that the sword is swung the wrong way. And, there's a lot of mental challenges, even physical challenges that our young people are experiencing because as adults, like we're not doing that work.
100%. And so my last kind of like simple question in terms of that is like, what are your thoughts on like, or what CHAS's like procedures on like running, making players run for discipline or push-ups or whatever it is?
Yeah, this is like, oh, this is another one. I love this.
Yeah.
So we don't support making kids run because they didn't understand a skill or an instruction, right? Like there's so many other ways of helping a kid improve and get them up to whatever standard we need them to than running, right? Like I remember growing up running lines and running 17s, right? Because like we're over like 11 years old because like we didn't do the 3-man weave right, or maybe missed the layup, right? And it's like, as a coach, did if it didn't look right, like you can see that your kids are not doing the 3-man weave right, or it's like, let's start with that, right? Something, it's all over the place. How about this? Instead of yelling at them and saying they're not doing it right, did you get them together and ask like, hey, like, I know I communicated A, B, and C, right? What are some things that people are not like understanding, or like, does anybody have any questions about like how we need to be doing the weave or what needs to be happening? Like, right? We don't have those conversations with kids to check in with them to see where they're at, right? So it's like there's so many other things that we can do that are going to create a really good team culture and help our kids develop rapidly. But oftentimes we like to resort to just like penalties, and not realizing like, as a coach, we have kids missing layups in games all the time. I got to look back at my practice and realize like, oh wait, we haven't even allocated time for our kids to understand how to shoot a layup, right? Like they miss a layup and it's like 15 push-ups, but it's like, well, actually, you haven't incorporated any skill development to your practice. We're just working on the shell drill and our offense. And so when we resort to running or push-ups, I think it's just like there's so many other things as coaches that we can do to make sure the kids are developing and our team is developing, that at the end of the day, if you have to resort to running or push-ups, we're not doing a lot of things in between to help them grow.
And so my own 2 cents with it is I feel like it's lazy, right? It's easy to just be like 10 push-ups for missing your layup, or you know, it's the line of 17s because we're not focusing. Like that's easy because we don't have to address them. We just have to, hey, you're running, why, right? But we don't address, we don't try and teach and get them to improve or whatever it may be, right? And so it's just these quick little penalties, and then oh, you're back, and then we're back to it. And then it's a podcast conversation for another day, where if you're missing layups but you're only doing layups with no defense on, but that's another practice. That's another conversation for another
100%,
day.
100%. You get it.
Yeah.
You really have to build up, and like in your practices, there's some basketball. I mean, all sports are really tough, right, to teach. But I feel like some with basketball, there's so many different skill sets that one player has to have. And
yeah,
you think about the game now, it's like every player has to have like more skill sets than I feel like they've had to have in the past. That if you're a coach and you're not really addressing those things and thinking about how to scale, right, and sequence a lot of those skill sets, then you're going to see a lot of those, things happen, like missed layups with defense and different, in different situations, right? If you're not practicing that, like how do you expect the kid to be fully confident, right, and being able to perform how they want to? So that's a whole nother
100%.
podcast, like you
It's a
said.
whole nother podcast, 100%.